It brings me no pleasure to report that Zac Taylor figured out Brian Flores, cracked that nut and solved him like a puzzle, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the party's over. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers. Sound off if you can. Love hearing from you, those of you who listen to this show every single day. And if you're new to this show, hello and welcome. My name is Luke Braun. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether that is any audio listening place, including SiriusXM. And by the way, if you download the SiriusXM app, you can search out Vikings and find live broadcasts of all of the Vikings games there. We're partnered with them. Very excited about that. You can also find the show on Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. You can also find the show on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we're going to talk all defense today, and here's how I want to start this. Zac Taylor cracked the code. He figured out the Brian Flores defense and put a whole bunch of stuff on tape that absolutely is copyable from other teams. I hate to tell you that. I don't want that to be the case, but that is a solvable problem. I also want to go to bat a little bit for Caleb Evans, who I think got a little bit too much heat after that game, and I don't think he had that bad of a game. It was actually kind of crazy that he was involved in some of those big contested catches that you remember that weren't actually his job, which is always the danger of defensive back, where you are sometimes caught in a position where the only person who can make a play is you from out of position, and you got to just go try to make it. And if you get close but don't get there, it's almost worse than if you didn't get there at all, because then you get caught on camera getting put on a poster. I'll explain a couple of those reps to you that I also went over on Twitter, but first let me zoom way out to the take at the beginning of the video and the title, or of the podcast and the title. Which is Zac Taylor figured this out. He cracked this nut. There are a few ways he did that. One was by spamming Dagger. He's not the first team to spam Dagger on the Minnesota Vikings, but he's the first team to find that much success spamming Dagger against the Minnesota Vikings. If you are unclear, Dagger is a 2 wide receiver concept. The innermost wide receiver, the slot receiver, will run a clear out. That means go down the field, bring a deep defender with you, and then right behind him, there will be an in. Call it a basic, call it a dig. That is meant to occupy the space that the first defender vacated when he went to chase the clear out. It's very old concept. I'm pretty sure Fran Tarkenton threw some Dagger. Very much a time-honored and established classic that's in everybody's playbook, but it does happen to be a very good cover 2 beater, whether that's Tampa 2 or regular cover 2, because you get rid of one. There's only one deep defender on that side of the field, and both of those routes will end up being pretty deep. When the Eagles did this to the Vikings, what they didn't also do was have an intermediate route meant to pin an underneath defender. So the Vikings could adjust. They could send their deep defender out with the clear out route, and then one of the underneath defenders could kind of become a new deep defender and replace and honestly kind of lurk and try to get an interception, which Theo Jackson did against Dagger against the Eagles. You probably remember that interception. But the Bengals had an underneath defend or an underneath route, some kind of spot or usually something like that, or some kind of, quick out or something that would occupy the Theo Jackson in that case and give him something that he has to crash down on. And now suddenly that's wide open. That's how they got the 3rd and 21. That was such a disappointing moment. That's how they killed the Vikings in a whole bunch of other situations. They got a nasty one to Jamar Chase that was wide open over the zone. That was a concept that just killed the Vikings. I was talking to my dad after the game, and he was like lamenting the soft defense. I even got a lot of questions that were like, did Brian Flores get conservative down the stretch? Absolutely not. If you didn't see the scoreboard before every play on the All-22, you would have no idea that those plays were in 2 minutes. It's that they got killed by Dagger, And they got killed by the Bengals taking advantage of their blitz rules. So I've talked at length on this show about their blitz rules and their hawk blitz. So if you want more detail, you can go into that there. You can find old episodes. But real quick, basically, the idea is everybody lines up on the line, and if the protection slides toward you, you back off into coverage. If it slides away from you, you blitz, which essentially guarantees that there's going to be some unblocked rushers. Here's how the Bengals handled that. They would slide their protection not only toward the biggest, slowest guy on the field, whether it's Harrison Phillips or whoever, they got defensive linemen in coverage all day long by taking advantage of those drop or blitz rules. And then they would throw something to the flat to that side to make that guy run. I'm sorry, Harrison Phillips isn't going to catch up with Tyler Boyd in the flat. Like, that's just not going to happen, right? That they spammed that down the stretch. They really got the Vikings in a matchup sense down the stretch. And they did matchup hunting a lot over the course of the game. They found a matchup early in the game with Tyler Boyd again running with Ivan Pace, who is running as a middle runner in Tampa 2. That means that, a middle of the field defender carrying a wide receiver deep with a linebacker. And that's one of those things against cover 2 and cover 3 that is, I think, an underutilized answer to those things, which is, yeah, you got a deep defender. You got one deep defender. I got Jamar Chase. I got Justin Jefferson, right? Let's send it and have a contested catch battle with Jamar Chase versus a safety. That's going to be a good matchup. And the Bengals trust the absolute heck out of their wide receivers, which to replicate this, I think that is an absolute necessity. The Lions feel really good about the receiving corps with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta and all those guys. They feel really good about it. I don't know if they feel quite as, we're just going to have you guys shoulder the whole load as the Bengals are. They really do put the whole game plan on their wide receivers. But I look at like the Packers, they might not have the trust in those guys. If you listen to like Locked On Packers or whatever, there's all kinds of gripes about Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and all these guys that are not answering the call when the game is put in their shoulders. And so Jordan Love has to do more and stuff. So I don't know if the Packers can replicate that kind of stuff, that matchup hunting. But they found a way to get a corner route on a half safety, right? And yeah, Cam Bynum, that's in his zone. He's responsible for it. So on the whiteboard, that corner route is taken care of. But guess what? He got beat on the corner route. Now it was a touchdown. That was a T. Higgins touchdown. The other touchdown, the T. Higgins touchdown, that was the one where he grabbed a contested catch and reached it over. I'll talk about that later when I talk about a Caleb Evans. But they found a lot of ways to put deep third players into conflict, and that was one of them. The problem is those are all deep developing concepts, which means you need to execute them really, really, really tightly against a blitz, or else that pressure is going to get home, and the Bengals did. So you have to have a fast offense with good receivers. If you have a fast offense with good receivers, I'm genuinely worried that you can just look at the Bengals tape, couch all their concepts, install them over the week, and kill the Vikings. Especially if you've got, faster players after the catch that can, take those flat routes and take advantage of the blitz routes. Now, does that mean the party's over? Does that mean that everybody, is going to just like kill Brian Flores now and we should actually just like abandon ship while we still can and just start running like quarters or something? No, of course not. And all I mean when I say Zac Taylor solved Flores is that he put out a bunch of beaters. He put out a whole bunch of tape and like 3 or 4 really good staple concepts that other teams can add to their game plan if they have the horses for it. Didn't say anything about what Brian Flores can do about that, because guess what? He's not a potato. So I want to talk about problem solving a little bit there, as well as getting into the Caleb Evans point that I kind of want to make too. So we'll get into that next. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy, the largest daily fantasy platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. All you got to do is, instead of putting together an entire lineup and entering a pool with 600,000 people, the house sets the amount, and you just got to pick more than or less than. You don't have to try to maximize fantasy points, which is so much harder and, to me, so much less fun of a game. Smash them all together, try to get a better payout. They even have basketball ones. You can have, Anthony Edwards threes plus TJ Hawkinson touchdowns, more than, less than, whatever, right? And now you can even find community plays under the promos tab and play alongside Meek Mill. If you wanted to do that, you can do that. You can find all that stuff at prizepicks.com or on the PrizePicks app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks again to all of my #everydayers for listening to this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. For your second listen of the day, assuming this is your first, why don't you go check out the 24/7 YouTube feed on Locked On Minnesota Sports. 24/7 Minnesota sports content. Just throw that thing on in the background and forget about it and fill your brain with good Locked On content. I would also love it if you checked out patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, where at some point, either today or tomorrow, I will have a video version of a lot of these points up. So if you want to see some film, go check that out. You can also find an episode I did on QB sneaks, which is related to a wide left post that I did with Arif Hassan as well. Let's move on, though, to what the solutions are to this particular problem. In particular, the Tampa problem. That's the one that really freaks you out, right? Because everybody has Dagger versus Tampa 2. Everybody has Dagger. Everybody can run Dagger. And it's not even that hard of a throw. So this is the kind of thing that can kill them all year long if they don't figure out a way to do it. Now, there are a few solutions that Tampa 2 teams have access to that are very interesting. One is invert. Invert is really interesting. They did a lot of it earlier in the season. I think they kind of moved off of it as they tweaked and adjusted the defense for a lot of reasons. I think they didn't quite want that much rotating post snap. That's a long way for guys to run to get to their places. And I think it was a little too exploitable. But in moderation, it can be a pretty good counterpunch. And the reason is that, so invert Tampa 2 is the same zones, but it just changes who does what. So usually in Tampa 2, the corner will be an underneath defender all the way out in the flat, right? The cornerback. So that's a Caleb Evans, right? He'll be the underneath defender all the way out in the flat. And then the safety will cover the deep half of the field. In invert, you just switch those two guys. A Caleb Evans drops all the way back. He covers the deep half of the field. And then the safety, say it's Harrison Smith, will come down and be a flat defender. It muddies the read for young quarterbacks. It messes guys up. You see safeties crashing down, and you think maybe that half zone or the deep parts of the field will be open. It's difficult to figure out what kind of safety shell you're dealing with because you can't even figure out who the safeties are. And it works a little bit better to muddy the read. But the other thing that it does is that flat route, that underneath whatever thing that pins a zone defender down so that the dig can go behind him on Dagger, that Cincinnati used so well. Well, now you have a very clear idea of who takes that. And the deep defenders in invert Tampa 2 can now split the responsibilities of the clear out and the dig a little bit more easily, right? And more traditionally like you usually would in Tampa 2 in that way. Personally, I think it works best if the middle runner, especially with the Vikings, where that guy is not necessarily a linebacker. That's Josh Metellus or Cam Bynum, Harrison Smith a lot of the time. It's even cornerbacks sometimes, can run with that clear out. And then you have a safety nailing down on the dig, which gets kind of interception-y. That's my favorite way to do it, especially with the personnel that the Vikings use. But if you do that from invert, it's a longer way for guys to run, right? So you need Cam Bynum to be able to come crash down and really grab somebody, and if the quarterback decides to throw that spot route. He's been phenomenal at that this year, so I have no issue with that. It's a little harder, but easy ask for Cam Bynum, I think. But if you have a cornerback who then is running back into a half zone, a deep half zone, and then his job becomes the dig, he's actually coming from underneath that, and it gets even more interception-y. So I really like the idea of invert as a bit of a counterpunch to keep those opposing offensive coordinators off of Dagger a little bit, and maybe not like that concept nearly as much as Zac Taylor did. When it comes to hunting matchups, that is something I think you just have to put up with. If you're only going to have 5 guys in coverage a lot of the time, you don't necessarily get the luxury of choosing who covers who. The offense can have that luxury, and the hope is that you just get home. But one of the things that the Bengals did was a lot of 5-0 protections, which means 5 men on 5 men with no slide, which when there isn't a slide, a lot of the Vikings pressures that are meant to take advantage of a slide turn into a series of one-on-ones. And the Vikings just didn't win those one-on-ones fast enough. They did win them sometimes, but not fast enough. Danielle Hunter was all over Jake Browning, hitting him as he threw all day long, but Jake Browning just got those throws off, right? Which is something somewhat encouraging, right? Like, you need a guy to just have the game of his life. And Jake Browning had a phenomenal game. No caveats. Fantastic game. That interception was stupid. There were a couple of things earlier in the game that you might not have liked, but you'd be nitpicking. It was a fantastic game and a lot of really, really pro quarterbacking from him. Reputation be damned. I think against the Vikings, he and Justin Herbert are the only two I would say like played their best football against the Vikings. Everybody else was reduced to a shell of themselves, including guys like Mahomes and Hurts. Guys that have been in MVP conversations lately, guys that have been in MVP conversations this year. So no small accomplishment there. But because those weren't getting home in time, it gave the Bengals time to take advantage of 5-man cover concepts where there's going to be holes all over the field. There's only 5 guys. They can only cover so much grass. So one of the solutions would be faster stunts, or guys, please just win your one-on-ones, right? If you have, Danielle Hunter one-on-one with a guard, which actually wasn't really the case. It'd be something more like Patrick Jones one-on-one with a guard. That happened a lot. Patrick Jones has got to win that. DJ Wanham and Patrick Jones weren't winning enough. The defensive tackles like Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard were not winning enough. Ivan Pace wasn't winning enough, and Danielle Hunter was the only one I probably wouldn't put this on. But one guy just isn't enough, and the Vikings need a more serious pass rush. So it's more of an off-season note, but get a pass rusher. Get some explosive playmaker on the defensive line. I don't care if it's an edge or a tackle. Get a dude that kills quarterbacks. Of course, you're missing Marcus Davenport, who, by the way, seems to be working his way back from IR. He's out of the walking boot, I guess. And there's optimism that he'll be able to be back before the end of the regular season, which would be really nice. That would be very much a godsend with a couple of tough games coming up. But you need a more serious one-on-one pass rush. If teams are going to abandon slides, they're going to give you a lot of one-on-ones. You have to be able to punish that by winning your reps. And stunts are a great way to mess with 5-0 protection. But again, those take longer. Guys have to go horizontal before they can go vertical and get into the quarterback's face. So we got to get to the quarterback, right? Or we have to cover a little bit longer. When it comes to the Hawk Blitz answer that the Vikings had, or that the Bengals had for the Vikings, where if they had Harrison Phillips drop out and then make Harrison Phillips run to the flat, I think adjusting the actual drop angles could help a lot, because when Harrison Phillips or whoever drops out of the line of scrimmage to join the coverage, he is dropping into a hook zone toward the middle. So he'll be dropping to like a hash mark or something, or some landmark that is fairly central on the field, not way out to the flat. But if you have him say, now you got to drop to the numbers, that angle will be a little bit better, give him a little bit of a head start, and it'll give him a better chance to run some of that stuff down, or maybe even take it away and discourage the throw in the first place. The last thing I want to say is, in coverage, the Vikings had a lot of communication issues. And in fact, all over the place, they had communication issues in this game, which we haven't seen from them once all year. So they were really befuddled, and it was an off day for them. So that result might be more extreme than it would have been on a normal day for them, but that's the way it goes, right? You get 18 opportunities, which means you get opportunities to mess up too. So I would love to see a little bit less, like they did a lot of double teaming clear out go routes. I don't like that. I don't think that that's a good use of resources, especially in moments where you have limited guys in coverage. To send 2 of them out with a clear out, it's exactly what an offensive coordinator wants. You're going to get killed doing that. So when you're in Tampa 2, when you're in cover 3, and there is a clear out route going up the seam, you just have to be more clear on, you take that, I don't take that. And you just have to have kind of game plan reasons for doing it. You see a lot of dagger, you think you're going to see a lot of dagger, Have the outside guy take that clear out route, the deep outside third, and then the middle third player, if we're in cover 3, the middle third player can then drive down on the dig and maybe even, slow play it a little bit and try to bait an interception. And I think the same thing kind of goes with Tampa too. Have the half safety take that clear out route. And if they want to throw a go route against a safety, bless them, 60-yard route against a half safety, you go for it. That's kind of exactly what cover 2 wants. And if they win that, they win that. I'll take that matchup. But I really want to see the Vikings communicate that a little bit better and have, fewer open guys in the middle of the field. I don't want to see Jared Goff slice and dice this defense, but that's what we're going to have to start talking about. Before I sort of transition fully into Lions mode, we got the crossover coming up tomorrow. A quick word about a Caleb Evans, who I think is getting a little bit too much heat. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. It's the best place to get last-minute tickets. It is not too late to get your ticket to the Winter Whiteout on Christmas Eve. If you would like to maybe have a Christmas Eve outing to a Vikings game, but boy, it's usually just too late. The prices are crazy marked up. Give Gametime a whirl. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of any event, whether it's a football game or a Timberwolves game maybe, or a concert or comedy or whatever. Even an hour after it starts, you can get tickets, which I'm going to guess that the prices probably go down quite a bit after the start, right? Because people are just trying to get rid of their tickets by then. Great place to find last minute seats, flash deals, and zone deals where you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats. If you're not particular, right? You can just say, give me something in this section. Gametime will find the seats and you can get an average of 18% savings doing that. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Moving along with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, I want to caution you a little bit about defensive backs in particular. TV lies to you about defensive backs. This is a universal principle. You cannot see how they dropped. You cannot see the coverage shell. You cannot see their assignment. And this was a strong example of that. The biggest one to me, best example of this was the T. Higgins touchdown I mentioned earlier on a Caleb Evans, where Higgins catches a contested catch. Evans is also in there. Higgins just kind of mosses him, gets 2 feet down, doesn't even get tackled, reaches across the goal line, touchdown Bengals. They tie the game at 24-24 with 48 seconds to go. Just the craziest play ever, right? On that play, T. Higgins was not a Caleb Evans' man. The fact that he was in that play was really, really heads up. So they were in cover 3, and the Bengals were running a flood concept to that side. You can almost think of it, it wasn't quite exactly the same, but you can almost think of it as 7 Heaven, which is the Minneapolis Miracle route concept. It was not quite there, but it was just a flood concept. There's a deep, a middle, and an intermediate over to that side. Now, if you know cover 3, you know that flood is really good against it because cover 3 has 2 defenders to each sideline. They've got a low defender on the sideline. That's the curl flat guy that's covering like shallow stuff. And they have the deep defender. That would have been a Caleb Evans on that play. So if there's 3 routes and only 2 defenders, someone's going to be open. On that play, I think it was Boyd, ran an out route from the outermost position in a bunch. When that happens, a Caleb Evans has to take it in cover 3. That is his job. So Tyler Boyd was his man. And the corner route should have been, I think, a flooded coverage from Mekhi Blackmon, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not even 80% sure about that. That's my best guess. But somebody should have run with that, or maybe a hook player should have seen everybody's releasing vertical. But basically the way you look at that is if you see too many routes releasing vertically, then someone needs to adjust their zone and follow that if both of them break outside, right? What they had going was like a banjo rule where Byron Murphy took the underneath thing, whatever came out of the bunch. And that's one of the things with bunches is that they will switch releases a lot and you get a lot of weird stuff out of a bunch. So instead of saying, I have that guy, you say, I will play whoever goes underneath, you play whoever goes outside, and you play whoever goes inside. So Caleb Evans plays whoever goes outside, or it's first outside and first inside. So the first route to break outside was Tyler Boyd. That's a Caleb Evans' man. First inside was nobody. Nobody broke to the inside. There was a second one to the outside, which I believe is an adjustment that Mekhi Blackmon has to make to run with him, but I'm not 100% sure, and it's also a fairly forgivable mistake. It's kind of designed to beat those coverages, right? But when the ball is thrown, Caleb Evans comes off of his man, drops 10 yards to the pylon, probably 5 yards of width as well, to the pylon to make that, and he actually drops just a little bit too far, but it's a really, really athletic and heads-up play to even get involved there. And yeah, you lost at the catch point. T. Higgins got your goat, and getting, reached out like that's a crazy play. But I'm not super bugged by it, because for me, sometimes you just tip your hat to the other team. And I think too often I'll get these questions all the time when there's like this crazy play and someone gets all kinds of praise for a play, and Vikings fans will say, yeah, but what did the defender do wrong? And sometimes it's not really anything. Sometimes the other dude just got a good play, man. T. Higgins is a good player. He's getting paid for a reason. And it's okay to tip your hat and just give credit to the Bengals and say, all right, good play, without having to manufacture any kind of major scathing criticism for our guy. He just lost a rep. Happens. I should also mention on that play, Mekhi Blackmon kind of got caught standing there, was celebrating what he thought was the most insane Caleb Evans interception, which it would have been. And so when T. Higgins reached over, Mekhi Blackmon wasn't there to like make the play or try to, fumble that, right? Like if he knocks that ball out, fumble through the end zone, we could have had the craziest thing there, right? He apologized on Twitter for it and said like, yeah, that was my bad. I got caught up in the moment. I'll do better, blah, blah, blah. He took the heat for that one. Bad rep. Don't let it happen again. Sounds like he learned his lesson. The second play I want to talk about is sort of similar. It is, you might remember, I think it was from the first quarter, absolutely insane throw from Jake Browning to Jamar Chase. That looked like a wheel route. It was a rail route, which is sort of similar. Rail is when you'll see Jamar Chase come across in motion and then turn upfield and it turns into a go route. And then T. Higgins ran a seam route, or you could even call it like a slant post or something like that. But basically it becomes two verticals up that side. Again, the Vikings are in a cover 3 look. Now they blitzed 7 on that play, so it's not exactly cover 3, but for that side, the rules are cover 3. They look like they're playing cover 3 rules to me at least. And in cover 3, especially 3 match, which is kind of the way that cover 3 manifests itself in modern day defenses, when you have a late number 1, so if you think about like 1, 2, 3, the way that defenses will label receivers, the 1 is the outermost guy, the 2, the 3 you count in. So you have the 1, that was T. Higgins. He runs deep. That occupies a Caleb Evans, who is the deep third player. When the 1 goes deep, I take him. When there is a late 1, which means somebody coming in motion or a wheel route or something like that, the underneath player typically has to carry him, and that would have been Josh Metellus. Typically. Because they're in a weird blitz look, because Flores' defense is weird, because there's a little bit more zonishness to it, that might not have been the rule. So I don't want to speak out of turn, and I don't want to speak with a lot of certainty. But however you slice it, Caleb Evans ends up kind of responsible for 2 guys because there's 2 deep routes to his zone. So he's sort of in conflict, and he ends up running with T. Higgins. The ball gets thrown to Chase. He has his eyes on the quarterback the entire time while shuffle stepping. Which is a really, really aggressive way to play it and shows a lot of confidence to be able to keep your eyes on the quarterback. And he gets rewarded because he gets to see that the quarterback is throwing something else deep that's sort of in his vicinity, and he ends up breaking on it and forcing that ball to be really, really, really good. He really closed down that throwing window, and the throw was bananas. So again, you just tip your hat. I think he got a lot of flack for those because it looked like, he just got beat, right? Oh, he just got killed. There was another play where he was playing an underneath responsibility. He passed off a deep route. Safety was coming up over the top, and then he actually almost made the play that was thrown after he had passed it off. Now, I think he might have been wrong to pass that off, so there was that mistake, but people are mischaracterizing the mistake anyways. Just be really careful on TV. If you see the camera pan over, you don't know how the D-back got there. That's all I want to say. You don't know how the D-back got. If you know how the D-back got there, be as critical as you want. But if you don't know how a D-back got there, maybe wait till you know how the D-back got there. Before you say someone had a bad play, you should probably see all of it. I feel like that's a reasonable principle to live by. Tomorrow, we got Matt Derry, Locked On Lions. We're going to talk to him twice in rapid succession here. Here we are. These are the games. You looked at the schedule when it first came out. These are the 3 games. You go, oh, well, season's probably just coming down to that. Lo and behold, Vikings win out. They have a pretty good shot to win the division. If they lose out, they're out of the playoffs. Comes down to these 3, right? And any number of things in between can happen. Comes down to these 3. We're going to talk about the Lions with Locked On Lions tomorrow. Can't wait to get into that conversation. I'll see you for that. And as always, Skull.